Imagine a life meticulously crafted, complete with professional success, social recognition, and all the external markers of a life well-lived, yet beneath the surface, a persistent feeling of emptiness gnaws at the soul. But what if the true tragedy of a wasted life isn't found in external failures, but in a deeply rooted internal avoidance of your own psyche, a refusal to confront the hidden parts of yourself that demand to be seen? It's a challenging idea, and perhaps a disturbing one to consider. This is the idea that Carl Jung turned on its head, revealing a radically different understanding of what it truly means to waste one's potential. Jung believed that the greatest loss isn't a lack of achievement or recognition, but a failure to integrate your own shadow, those hidden aspects of your personality, both positive and negative, that you'd rather ignore. This isn't about a few isolated cases. This is about you, me, and almost everyone else. It's about the fundamental nature of the human condition and the often unconscious forces that govern our behaviors and desires, and how this bleeds into every facet of our existence. If you've ever felt a profound sense of dissatisfaction, even in the midst of your greatest accomplishments, it's likely that what you're experiencing is tied to this. The real challenge, Jung suggested, is that we spend our lives avoiding this inner world, much like a homeowner who meticulously maintains the pristine facade of their house, while the basement is a chaotic, dark, and unexplored mess. We polish our external image, striving for perfection in the eyes of society, while simultaneously allowing the darker, more challenging aspects of ourselves to fester in the unconscious. But this isn't a safe practice, for these neglected inner aspects will eventually cause cracks to form in the very foundation of our lives, leading to patterns of self-sabotage, unexplainable mood swings, and a pervasive sense of unease. This constant avoidance creates an inner tension that manifests in ways we do not understand. This avoidance, however, goes even deeper, for we often have a critical blind spot when it comes to recognizing our own internal flaws, often with an uncanny ability to see those same flaws in the people around us, an unconscious process of misattribution that keeps us from seeing what lies deep within ourselves. We are quick to criticize the faults of others, yet strangely reluctant to acknowledge those same faults when they appear in our own lives. These hidden drives and unacknowledged traits often lead to self-defeating cycles, which we are compelled to repeat, often without any real awareness of their origins. And it's not just about personal unhappiness. This internal avoidance also sabotages our ability to create deep and authentic relationships. The problem is that we are often not even aware of this internal struggle, leading to a form of self-deception that robs us of our true potential. This isn't just about self-improvement. It's about living authentically, understanding your unique role in the world, and avoiding the endless trap of living your life based on projections and the expectations of others, a kind of social camouflage. It's about engaging in your own individual journey and not living out a life based on the template handed down to you by your environment. When we aren't true to ourselves, we are merely acting out a role in a play that we never chose to be a part of, which is one way that we can waste our entire life. Jung's ideas come from a deep exploration of the human psyche. His break from Freud was due to a difference in focus. While Freud was largely concerned with the personal unconscious, Jung was drawn to the collective unconscious and the archetypal forces that shape our inner world. This fascination with the deeper recesses of the psyche led him to explore the shadow and the persona, these two critical facets of our inner experience that we must come to understand. The shadow, for Jung, wasn't some evil entity, but rather the repository of all the disowned and repressed aspects of our personality, both negative and positive, that we refuse to acknowledge. It includes traits like anger, envy, resentment, and even our suppressed desires for power or recognition. But it also includes positive traits we may suppress like ambition, creativity, and our untapped potential. Failing to integrate this shadow doesn't make it disappear, it just forces it to operate in the unconscious, manifesting as self-sabotaging behaviors and a pervasive feeling of unease and dissatisfaction. This is why Jung believed that the greatest tragedy in life is not being true to ourselves. Moreover, this unacknowledged shadow is also often projected onto others, meaning we see our own disowned traits in the people around us. When we are quick to judge someone else for their perceived flaws or shortcomings, it's often a mirror reflecting the aspects of ourselves that we cannot accept. This mechanism prevents us from developing authentic relationships, as we are often interacting with our own projections rather than the people in front of us. It is an unconscious process that keeps us from facing our internal realities and leaves us stuck in a loop of external blaming. So, if a wasted life isn't just about a lack of external success, and is instead about the failure to engage with your own unconscious, and specifically your own shadow, the question becomes, how do we do that, and why is it so difficult? The path to individuation, the process of becoming a whole and integrated person, requires confronting uncomfortable truths about ourselves, an exploration of the unknown parts of our own minds. And while we're navigating these unknown parts of ourselves, we often hide behind a persona, a kind of mask we wear to fit into social expectations, a necessary tool for navigating social situations, but also one that can lead to deep self-deception. Over the course of this video, we will look at how this process can change your perspective on everything, revealing how your hidden self is affecting your life, and offering a path towards a truly authentic and fulfilling life. The persona, that social mask we all wear, isn't inherently detrimental. It is, in many ways, a necessary construct, a curated image we present to the world to navigate social situations, an adaptation that allows us to fit in and get our needs met. It's akin to an actor adopting a role for a performance. It allows for different behaviors depending on the situation. For instance, you might act differently at work than you do with your closest friends, or shift your demeanor to fit into different social circles. This process begins in childhood, where we quickly learn which aspects of ourselves are acceptable and which are not, and then adjust our presentations of ourselves accordingly. This is how we learn to interact with others and find our place in the world. It's part of what makes us social beings. But there's a critical distinction between employing a persona and becoming completely identified with it, a separation that is key to understanding how it can so easily lead to a wasted life. When we start to believe our own mask, when we fail to recognize that the persona is merely a role we play, we lose touch with our authentic selves and the hidden aspects of our psyche. It's much like an actor who becomes so absorbed in their part that they forget where the character ends and they begin, leading to a dangerous blurring of the lines between their true nature and a fictitious identity. Think of the workaholic who cannot conceive of themselves beyond their job title, or the socialite whose entire identity is entwined with their social standing. In these scenarios, the persona has ceased to be a tool and become a prison, and these individuals have become completely alienated from their own core being. Many individuals, perhaps the majority, live their entire lives solely within the confines of their persona, never daring to explore the depths of their own being. This avoidance, a kind of spiritual laziness, allows one to stay in the shallows of existence, completely divorced from their true selves. Consider the contrast between the person who actively challenges their persona, questioning its validity, and one who completely identifies with it, never straying from the expected role. It's in this avoidance that a slow erosion occurs, a kind of self-betrayal where one's authentic nature is slowly suffocated by the social role they have adopted. The individual becomes a mere shadow of their true potential, a tragic figure in the theater of their own lives, never able to truly connect with anything real. Consider the individual who always presents a confident facade, yet is plagued by deep-seated insecurities and fears that they refuse to face, or the person who constantly plays the nice guy, always putting others' needs ahead of their own, all the while harboring a deep well of resentment beneath their seemingly placid exterior. These are not isolated examples. They are pervasive patterns, manifesting in both professional and personal life, creating a stark disconnect between the individual's outward presentation and their inner state, which is often marked by confusion, anxiety, and a sense of profound emptiness. It is the psychological cost of maintaining this disconnect that is truly devastating, slowly undermining one's ability to live an authentic life. Moving past the persona, let's look more closely at the concept of shadow projection, for it offers a deeper insight into our internal world and how it impacts our interactions. Projection is not merely about seeing flaws in others. It's about disowning aspects of ourselves that we find unacceptable, transferring these disowned traits onto those around us. It's like a projector casting an image onto a screen. We see our own unacknowledged characteristics reflected back to us from the outside world. Our judgments of others, therefore, become clues to our inner landscape, and the more we react to traits in others, the more likely it is that those are the characteristics we have the most trouble acknowledging within ourselves. This isn't a conscious decision. It's often an unconscious and automatic process, something that occurs without any intention or self-awareness on our part. Imagine someone who is constantly criticizing others for their faults, constantly pointing out their perceived laziness, selfishness, or dishonesty, yet is utterly blind to these same tendencies within their own behaviors. The individual's criticisms, in this case, are not a reflection of the person they are criticizing, but a mirror that shows the unacknowledged parts of themselves. Consider an individual who constantly complains about their partner's laziness, for example, when in reality they are projecting their own fear of failure and lack of motivation onto their partner. This behavior is rooted in their inability to confront their own lack of ambition and their discomfort with their own internal lack of drive. The internal tension this creates not only poisons the relationship, but also creates a barrier to their own self-understanding. It's always easier to point out the faults in others than it is to look into the depths of your own mind. This dynamic showcases how projection functions as a form of avoidance, a way to deflect from the difficult work of self-reflection. Individuals who fail to acknowledge their own shadow, who refuse to take responsibility for their negative qualities, are far more prone to engage in projection, perpetuating a cycle of conflict and miscommunication. It is a kind of shortcut, a means of bypassing the more arduous task of understanding one's own inner complexity, opting instead to assign these disowned aspects to someone or something else. It's easier to blame the world than it is to face yourself. These projections, however, do not exist in a vacuum and often poison our relationships, preventing us from seeing others as they truly are. When we project our shadow onto those around us, we're unable to form genuine connections and are instead interacting with the reflections of our own disowned qualities, rather than with the actual individuals themselves. Think of the relationship that is continually damaged by one partner projecting their insecurities onto the other, creating endless arguments and misunderstandings. This leads to a shallow, superficial existence, a kind of performance where we are always responding to phantoms rather than people. Now, we can begin to understand how both over-identifying with our persona and projecting our shadow can lead to an inauthentic existence. When we operate out of these unconscious mechanisms, we are not living a life of our own choosing, but a life dictated by unconscious compulsions and hidden agendas. Our actions become reactive, driven by the shadow's unacknowledged fears and desires. This creates a deeply unsatisfying sense of living out a pre-written script rather than writing your own story, and a perpetual feeling of chasing shadows. The unconscious, in this way, becomes the puppeteer, pulling the strings of our behavior without our consent or even our awareness. This lack of awareness leads to a loss of personal agency. Our choices and actions, instead of being driven by our conscious desires, become directed by our unconscious drives, as if we are being swept along by a current that we cannot control. This is the feeling of being a victim of circumstance rather than the author of one's own life, and living as if we're always at the effect of situations instead of being the cause of them. When we are not aware of what compels us, we are not truly free, and it's this lack of genuine self-determination that contributes to the pervasive feeling of living a wasted life. It is a kind of living death, where the individual is a mere husk of their potential, cut off from the wellspring of their own power. The only way to reclaim that agency is by actively engaging with our shadow and understanding our persona, for that is the only way to escape this cycle of unconscious compulsion. It's a process of taking back the controls, of transitioning from being a passive recipient of our unconscious whims to an active participant in our own lives. The contrast between living through the lens of our projections and living through the clear understanding of our true nature is stark. It's the difference between being adrift at sea and sailing with intention. And it's this distinction that marks the path to an authentic existence and reclaiming the power to author your own destiny. Compounding the issue, over-identification with our persona and projecting our shadow keeps us from actually addressing our true needs. They create a smokescreen that hides what truly motivates our behavior, substituting it with compulsive actions that never actually satisfy. Think of the person who constantly seeks external validation due to an underlying lack of self-worth, or who chases after material success to mask their deep feeling of inadequacy. These false needs are like a mirage in the desert, offering the illusion of sustenance, but ultimately leading to further frustration. It's as if we are using a false map, one that is preventing us from reaching our true destination, and only by removing the mask can we ever hope to truly understand the territory of our minds and to find our way. Recognizing these patterns, however, is only the first step, and awareness alone is not sufficient for real transformation. We must move beyond intellectual understanding and into practical application, for that is where true change begins. The tension exists between awareness of the problem and the ability to solve it. It is like knowing that a building is on fire, but not knowing how to put it out. We must engage in practices that allow us to explore our unconscious and not simply be a detached observer. It's the move from merely diagnosing an ailment to actually implementing a cure. This requires that we learn how to integrate our shadow and utilize the persona consciously instead of being controlled by them. This will be a process that is not a singular event, but an ongoing journey, a continuous cycle of self-reflection, challenge, and growth. It's akin to taming a wild animal, a process that requires patience, understanding, and persistent effort. This is how we make true, meaningful, and lasting change. The goal, therefore, isn't to eliminate our shadow or dismantle our persona, but to integrate them into our conscious awareness. This integration allows us to live more fully, to become a whole and complete person, and is the very thing that moves us towards individuation, towards becoming our truest selves, and it's this process that can prevent our lives from being lived out in the shadows. It's a call to move from merely existing to truly living, and the path we must take to reclaim the wasted parts of ourselves. Now that we've explored the theoretical underpinnings of the shadow and persona, it's time to delve into the practical methods for engaging with these often elusive aspects of ourselves. One of the most powerful techniques for exploring the unconscious is a method Jung called active imagination, a carefully structured way to dialogue with the unconscious in a safe and structured way. It's important to emphasize that active imagination isn't simply a form of random daydreaming, but rather a specific practice of engaging with the images, figures, and symbols that arise spontaneously from our minds. It is a means to access the hidden narratives within our psyches, and it often reveals the unconscious forces that are at play in our lives. To begin, you find a comfortable, quiet place where you won't be disturbed, and then focus on a particular image, feeling, or sensation that arises within you, and allow it to unfold without any censorship or judgment. This could take the form of visualizing a scene, or noticing an emotion that is present, and then giving yourself over to the experience. You might use writing or art as a medium to capture these inner experiences, and the goal here is not to control the narrative, but rather to act as a witness to what emerges from within you. This is, at its core, a process of discovery, and it requires a willingness to embrace the unknown and to approach the inner world with curiosity rather than with trepidation. In conjunction with active imagination, other practical methods can deepen our understanding of the unconscious, particularly journaling and dream analysis. Journaling allows us to record and reflect on recurring patterns, feelings, and reactions that appear in our daily lives. And by reflecting on these experiences, we begin to see the unconscious themes that permeate our lives. Dream analysis is a second and crucial tool, for it allows us to understand the symbolic language of the unconscious mind. These dreams, filled with potent imagery and symbolism, are a direct line to our unconscious, and through them, our shadow often reveals itself. It is essential to emphasize that these methods aren't about finding the answer, but rather about developing an ongoing conversation with the unconscious, a conversation that unfolds over time. We must pay careful attention to recurring themes, archetypal figures, and the emotional undertones present in both our dreams and our writings, for these are the keys to unlocking the deeper truths about ourselves. Analyzing a dream, for example, might involve looking at the recurring symbols present, the emotions that are experienced, and the overall narrative that appears. For example, if you repeatedly dream of being chased by a dark figure, that is a very clear indication that a shadow aspect is attempting to make itself known. Or perhaps it is highlighting a feeling of being pursued by something in waking life that is currently being ignored. The specific details that appear are not the point. It is the overall emotional tone and content of the dream that matters. This may not be straightforward and requires patience, perseverance, and a willingness to look at the things that make us uncomfortable. These practices require a willingness to face the unknown parts of ourselves, a move from living life in avoidance to choosing to engage with what lies beneath. Active imagination, journaling, and dream analysis all provide a pathway towards a clearer understanding of our shadows, our personas, and the recurring patterns that dominate our lives. And this stands in stark contrast to staying lost in our unconscious compulsions. It takes a kind of psychological courage to face our fears, our desires, and our insecurities, but it's precisely in these moments of self-confrontation that the most profound growth occurs. It is not a path for the faint of heart, yet the rewards for pursuing this path are immeasurable. These practices, when taken together, act like a flashlight, illuminating the darkest recesses of the unconscious mind, helping us to make what was once hidden, now conscious. Consider, for example, someone who is struggling with anger. Through active imagination, they might encounter a symbolic representation of their inner critic, perhaps a harsh, judgmental figure. By engaging in a dialogue with this figure, they may discover that their anger is actually a mask for their own feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt, and that their self-criticism is driving their anger. As they continue to engage with this inner critic, they begin to see that it is not an external enemy, but a disowned part of themselves that needs to be integrated. They could begin to see the origin of this pattern through dream analysis and journaling. This process isn't an overnight transformation, but a gradual integration of their shadow self, and it allows them to move from being controlled by their anger to understanding its root cause and managing it more consciously. It's this kind of exploration that leads to profound personal growth and the ability to live more authentically. The tension in this process is very real. We are often resistant to facing our shadow, yet the rewards of doing so are what makes life worth living. Now, turning our attention to the persona, it's important to clarify that the goal isn't to eliminate it completely, but to understand its purpose and to use it with intention rather than being controlled by it. This involves becoming more aware of when we are adopting a persona, and why, rather than letting it occur unconsciously. Think of the persona as a well-crafted tool. It can be used for a variety of purposes, and in the right context, it can be extremely valuable, yet if used carelessly or unconsciously, it can also be quite dangerous. The key is to remember that while we may adopt a variety of roles in life, we are still the same person underneath these masks, and we are no longer completely defined by them. This awareness gives us the power to consciously choose how we present ourselves. With this understanding, we can choose which persona to present in different situations without losing touch with our authentic selves. This means we're able to adapt our presentation to fit the social situation while simultaneously remaining grounded in our own true nature. It's the ability to be a chameleon, changing our colors when needed, yet always maintaining our core essence. For instance, you may present a more serious, professional persona at work, a more relaxed and playful one with your friends, and a more nurturing one with your family. The ability to do this consciously is the hallmark of self-mastery, and means we can still be authentic even while adopting various social roles, as long as self-awareness remains the guiding principle. It's the awareness that we are wearing a mask, but we are not the mask itself. This ability to consciously utilize the persona moves us from a state of avoidance to a state of engagement, allowing us to consciously choose how we present ourselves to the world. It's a move from unconsciously acting out a role to actively choosing one, and in doing so, we can begin to integrate the persona as a part of ourselves, while simultaneously not being defined by it. This conscious awareness gives us a form of psychological freedom, empowering us to live with greater agency, and that moves us from being driven by unconscious compulsions to consciously choosing how we live. It means we are no longer simply the actors on a stage being moved around, but that we are also the playwrights who are writing the scenes of our own lives, and that makes all the difference. For example, consider someone who uses their persona at work to navigate a difficult situation with a challenging client. They may need to project an air of calm confidence, even if they are feeling anxious or frustrated inside. They can use the persona strategically to achieve their goals, all while being aware of their own internal feelings and boundaries. And this is the difference between using a persona and being used by one. In this way, the persona is not a form of suppression, but a means of mastery, an ability to consciously adapt to different circumstances, all while maintaining a clear understanding of one's own true feelings. It's a way of engaging skillfully with the world and choosing the face we show to it. With this clear understanding of the persona and how we can utilize it effectively, we can now turn our attention to how we can recognize our own projections, for this will allow us to recognize them in others. Understanding our own projections is the key to recognizing them in the world around us. And by becoming more aware of our internal mechanisms, we begin to see how others are, in effect, playing out similar dramas, often using the same patterns we ourselves use, and this insight is very powerful. This recognition is the key to relating to others more authentically, and it allows us to stop being caught in the endless drama of our unconscious. It's like seeing the world through clear lenses instead of through distorted ones. When we remove our own projections, we begin to see others for who they actually are, instead of seeing them through the lens of our own biases and unconscious needs. It is often said that the world is a mirror, and when we project our disowned qualities onto others, we're actually seeing our own reflection rather than the actual person in front of us. Therefore, our emotional reactions to other people often provide insight into our own shadow. And intense negative reactions are often an indication that someone is embodying a trait that we have disowned in ourselves. When we feel excessively judgmental or disgusted by someone, it's likely that we're projecting our own disowned qualities, and these are the very aspects of ourselves that we have the hardest time accepting. These triggers are incredibly valuable because they point to our own blind spots, and they are often the very places we need to look in order to grow. This awareness allows us to engage with other people more authentically, rather than simply reacting from our own projections. By seeing others for who they are, instead of projecting our own internal baggage onto them, we open ourselves to genuine empathy and connection. This stands in stark contrast to the constant conflict that arises when projection is not recognized, and it is a move from being at war with the world to being at peace with it. This understanding means we're no longer reacting to ghosts of our past, but rather to the person that is actually in front of us. This is a shift in perspective that completely transforms all our interactions and all of our relationships. Imagine a scenario where someone is constantly irritated by a coworker whom they perceive as being lazy and incompetent. Through self-reflection, they realize that their own shadow holds a deep fear of failure, and that their extreme criticism of the coworker is simply a projection of their own insecurities. By recognizing this, the individual can shift their perspective from one of judgment to one of compassion. They can see their coworker as an individual and no longer as a symbol of what they fear about themselves. This new understanding can diffuse conflict and also create space for a more authentic interaction, and an entirely new dynamic emerges. Often, the people we find the most difficult are actually our greatest teachers. Finally, let's introduce individuation, a concept that is central to Jung's work. Individuation, for Jung, is the lifelong process of becoming a whole and integrated person, and it's important to emphasize that this is not a destination, but an ongoing journey. It's not about achieving some perfect ideal, but rather about embracing and integrating all aspects of ourselves, both light and shadow. Individuation isn't a linear path, but a complex dance that unfolds over time, and it is a unique journey for each individual, and what it means will be different for all of us. This journey, we must understand, is not a linear one. It inevitably involves periods of growth, periods of stagnation, and even periods of regression, but the overarching goal is to always keep moving towards wholeness, however circuitous that path might be. Challenges and setbacks are not failures, but natural parts of the process, and progress is often not immediate or even visible. Therefore, it's important to be compassionate with ourselves throughout this journey and to celebrate the small victories along the way. We must have patience, dedication, and also self-compassion, because the path will often be difficult. Think of the hero's journey in mythology. The path is rarely straight, and there are always tests and trials along the way. The process of individuation, therefore, is not about avoiding the unconscious, but about engaging with it. The path we are on asks us to actively engage with our unconscious rather than avoiding it, which is the very thing that prevents us from moving towards wholeness. This self-realization only occurs when we integrate our shadow and consciously utilize our persona. This is the great dance between our conscious and unconscious aspects, the very thing that gives our lives depth and meaning, and to not engage in it is to remain stuck in patterns of avoidance and suffering. Ultimately, taking responsibility for one's own individuation is key to preventing a life wasted on unconscious compulsions. For this journey requires active engagement and self-awareness, and it's here where the initial argument begins to take on a new shape. Personal responsibility and authentic meaning are now the central focus of the argument, because we are the authors of our own lives, and we have the power to choose what we do. Ultimately, the question isn't, how do I avoid living a wasted life? But rather, what choices am I making right now that are either taking me closer or further from my truest self? This, and this alone, is the power we have to change, and it is the very foundation of authentic self-determination. The implications of failing to embark on this journey of individuation are profound, and it is not merely a matter of lacking self-awareness, but rather an existential crisis that leads to a profound sense of meaninglessness and disconnection. When we avoid engaging with our unconscious, we remain alienated from ourselves, adrift in a world that feels increasingly foreign and empty. We may accumulate external achievements, garner praise and recognition from others, and appear successful by all conventional metrics. Yet, without a connection to our authentic being, these victories ring hollow. It's like holding a trophy that offers no real satisfaction, a symbol of success that fails to fill an internal void. And this empty feeling is a sure sign that we have not done the work of integrating our own psyche. Think of someone who climbs the corporate ladder, attaining wealth and status, only to discover that these accomplishments provide no lasting fulfillment, and they are left wondering, is this all there is? This experience of a hollow victory underscores the importance of inner exploration, revealing that true satisfaction comes not from external validation, but from a deeper connection with our own unique nature. Without this connection, we remain lost in a labyrinth of our own making, constantly searching for something to fill the void within. By remaining trapped in our personas and projections, we are not only failing to truly know ourselves, but we are also missing out on the richness and complexity of human experience. Living through a carefully crafted facade, we are limited in our capacity to experience genuine joy, profound love, and authentic connection, for these things require vulnerability and an openness to what is real, not simply what is presented. It's as though we are watching a movie of our own lives, rather than truly living them, and this superficial, externalized existence leaves us feeling as though we're always on the outside looking in. The depth of life, with its multitude of nuances and possibilities, can only be accessed through inner exploration, a journey that takes us beyond the limitations of our conscious awareness and into the very heart of our own being. For instance, consider a person who constantly seeks approval from others, always striving to project a perfect image. They may attain social success, yet will find that their relationships lack depth and authenticity, and they feel a persistent sense of isolation. This serves as a stark reminder that true fulfillment cannot be found in external validation, but only through the hard work of internal discovery. Those who avoid the internal landscape are often condemned to a shallow and superficial existence, while those who engage with it open themselves up to a world of possibilities and authentic experiences. This pattern shapes not only our psychological well-being, but also the very quality of our experiences, and a life lived in ignorance is, as Jung himself emphasized, a tragedy. It's like the difference between a shallow stream and a deep ocean. One offers only a superficial experience, while the other is full of unexplored depths, each holding their own particular mystery. Imagine two people, one who constantly avoids introspection, and the other who actively engages with their shadow and persona. The first individual might lead a predictable life, avoiding discomfort at all costs, while the second might experience a roller coaster of emotions and challenges, yet they will also discover a sense of meaning and depth that the other will never know. This contrast vividly highlights the transformative potential of confronting our internal landscape and the deep losses that result from remaining in a state of unconscious avoidance. A wasted life also means a failure to actualize our unique potential and gifts. Each of us is born with particular abilities, skills, and talents, yet these are often obscured by our unconscious patterns and suppressed by our fears and insecurities. When we allow our shadows and personas to dictate our choices, we often find ourselves working jobs that are completely misaligned with our true passions and abilities, living a life that feels inauthentic and unsatisfying. Imagine someone who has a natural talent for music, yet because of their fear of failure, works a mundane job they find soul-crushing. This represents a great loss, both for the individual and society, as their unique gifts are never fully realized. It is in this way that the world is robbed of the unique contributions that each of us has the potential to make, which is a profound and unnecessary tragedy. This underscores that we are not merely individuals, but that we are also interconnected parts of a greater whole, and that our own self-realization is crucial for the well-being of all. But what if I told you that what you have been running from might actually be your greatest ally? The crucial point is that our shadow, when integrated, is not a source of evil, but a source of energy and creativity. Within our disowned traits, those aspects of ourselves we've relegated to the depths of our unconscious, lies a hidden power and potential that is just waiting to be discovered. Emotions like anger or assertiveness, traits that are often perceived as negative, can be harnessed for positive ends when they are integrated and understood. For instance, anger, when channeled consciously, can be a catalyst for positive change and a source of powerful motivation. And assertiveness, when balanced with compassion, can empower us to stand up for what is right and to set healthy boundaries. By accepting all aspects of ourselves, even the uncomfortable ones, we become more whole, more powerful, and more capable of navigating the world. The essential element is that this process is about transforming our weaknesses into strengths, taking what we have perceived to be negative and turning it into gold. The persona, when used consciously, becomes a powerful tool for navigating the social world and achieving our goals. Our social masks, far from being something to be ashamed of, are, when used strategically, tools that we can use to our advantage, so long as they don't mask our authentic selves. This conscious use involves self-awareness and a deep understanding of how we use these masks to get our needs met without being driven by our unconscious compulsions. Consider a skilled actor who consciously steps into a role, understanding the nuances of the character they portray, and using that understanding to deliver a truly powerful performance. Similarly, we can use our persona as a tool of communication and interaction, so long as it is done with awareness and intention, and it doesn't become a form of self-deception. In this way, the persona becomes a part of us, not something that we are controlled by, and with this comes great power and potential. By integrating our shadow and using our persona consciously, we move beyond the either-or dichotomy of good versus bad, and into a more complex and nuanced reality. This psychological maturity allows us to move beyond simplistic, black and white thinking and begin to embrace the full spectrum of human experience, recognizing that we are complex beings with both light and shadow. The central importance lies in the fact that this integration allows us to live more authentically and effectively in the world, not by denying any part of who we are, but by embracing it all. This awareness makes us more flexible, adaptable, and resilient, and it allows us to see the world with a greater sense of clarity. Furthermore, we must also understand that the world is not what it seems. It's a mirror reflecting our inner state. We don't perceive reality objectively, but through our own internal filters, which are shaped by our projections and unconscious biases, and these biases inevitably color our perceptions. What truly matters is that this understanding can help us relate to others with more empathy, and also give us greater clarity about our own internal world. For by recognizing that our experiences are shaped by our internal state, we can begin to see the world with new eyes. When we can recognize that what is happening on the inside is always reflected on the outside, we begin to see the world in a different light, which is the very key to seeing the world clearly, rather than seeing it through the distortions of our unconscious. The process of individuation makes us more resilient and adaptable to the challenges of life. When we become more aware of our internal mechanisms, we are better equipped to deal with stress, conflict, and setbacks, responding to life's inevitable difficulties in a more conscious way, rather than being dictated by our unconscious patterns. We can learn to navigate the world with grace and courage, and the challenges we face become opportunities for growth and transformation, rather than something to be avoided at all costs. The essential element is that this shift in our perspective empowers us to not be victims of circumstance, but rather to become active participants in the creation of our own lives. Those who have integrated their shadows and are aware of their personas are better able to form genuine, meaningful relationships. When we are no longer projecting our shadow onto others and are aware of the masks we use in various relationships, We can relate to others as they truly are, rather than as a reflection of our own disowned traits. The crucial point is that these relationships are characterized by trust, honesty, and mutual respect, in stark contrast to the superficial interactions that occur when we remain trapped in our unconscious patterns. Think of the difference between a superficial acquaintance and a deep friendship. One is based on shallow interactions, while the other is characterized by a profound level of connection and understanding. Living consciously is not about escaping suffering, but about engaging with it from a place of understanding and self-awareness. The path of individuation doesn't eliminate challenges, but makes us more equipped to face them with wisdom, strength, and equanimity. Our struggles become opportunities for growth and transformation, rather than something to be feared and avoided, and the very nature of our challenges will begin to shift. It is like the difference between a ship that weathers a storm with skill and grace, and one that is destroyed by it because it was poorly designed and ill-prepared. And the difference between these two is the ability to understand the forces that are at play. When we embark on the path of individuation, we discover a sense of purpose and meaning that transcends the limitations of the ego and the expectations of others. We no longer seek validation from the outside, but instead connect to a deeper sense of purpose within ourselves. This is connected to our desire to actualize our unique potential and to contribute to the world in a way that feels authentic and meaningful. And this is the pathway towards a fulfilling and meaningful life. It's no longer about what we can get from the world, but rather what we can contribute, and this represents an important shift in our perspective. The power to create a life of meaning and purpose is entirely in our hands, which means we cannot blame our circumstances, our past, or other people for our unhappiness. It's our responsibility to confront our inner demons and to engage in the challenging but ultimately rewarding journey of self-discovery. It's here we see that a wasted life is indeed one where we have failed to accept this very responsibility. We have to make a conscious choice to engage in this process or remain in unconscious patterns that lead to suffering. This is the foundation of our power as human beings, and the knowledge of this power allows us to make very different decisions. And because life is indeed a mirror reflecting our inner world, our outer experiences will change as we begin to change internally. If you change your attitude, you will begin to change your external reality. It is often that simple, yet it requires dedication and commitment to our own process of self-exploration. True transformation always begins from within, and that means we must always start by changing ourselves. The world will reflect our inner state, and if we want to see a different world, we must first change ourselves, and this single shift in perspective can completely alter the course of one's life. Therefore, the path to not wasting our lives is not about avoiding hardship, but about actively engaging with our internal landscape with courage, honesty, and compassion. This process of self-discovery requires dedication and is a journey without an end point, a continuous movement towards wholeness, and this journey is essential for anyone who truly wants to live. This path brings us into our authentic selves and allows us to experience the fullness of life with all of its beauty and all of its challenges. Ultimately, embracing this journey is not just about preventing a wasted life, but about discovering the extraordinary potential within us that is always waiting to be unveiled. It is the potential to live with greater purpose, authenticity, and meaning, and the potential to overcome the limitations that we have imposed on ourselves. And as you continue to integrate these lessons, you will begin to experience a sense of empowerment that comes from truly knowing yourself and being in control of your own path. Understanding the psychological mechanisms that lead to a wasted life, recognizing our projections, and acknowledging the personas we inhabit is not enough to change them. We must take conscious action to do so, and that is where the crucial element of personal responsibility enters the picture. This journey of self-discovery requires actively taking ownership of our unconscious drives, rather than passively allowing them to dictate our lives, And this is the critical shift from simply understanding these patterns to actively changing them. It's one thing to know that our shadow influences our behavior, and another thing entirely to take concrete steps to integrate it. And this is the fundamental difference between intellectual understanding and personal transformation. Just as knowing the rules of the road is essential for driving a car, but it's completely useless if you refuse to get behind the wheel, so too is this knowledge useless if we fail to take responsibility for our own inner world. This requires a deep commitment to self-awareness, honesty, and self-compassion, because without these ingredients, our journey cannot even begin. We must understand that, even when it feels like we are at the mercy of our unconscious patterns, we always have a choice. While our shadows and personas may exert a strong influence on our behaviors, we are not merely puppets, forced to act out their whims, but rather we have the capacity to choose how we respond, even in the face of these powerful unconscious forces. The real power lies in the act of conscious decision-making, even if the initial steps are small and challenging. Consider, for example, an individual who has a compulsive habit of interrupting others during conversations. They might believe that this is simply part of their nature, something they cannot control. However, through a deep understanding of the pattern and with dedication, they can begin to notice the trigger, choose a different response, and ultimately break free from that compulsion, reclaiming their agency in the process. It is in this way that we take control over our own lives and move towards a more conscious experience of being. Failing to take responsibility is a form of continued avoidance, a way to stay in our comfortable patterns, where we don't have to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. But choosing to take action, no matter how small, is a decisive step towards engagement and individuation, and it is here that we see the cycle continue, and the critical point of how each choice reinforces the next, moving us closer to integration or further into alienation. Think of the seesaw, with one side representing avoidance and the other conscious engagement. Each choice, each decision we make, has the power to tip the balance, pushing us further into one direction or another, creating a continuous feedback loop. For instance, an individual who avoids conflict at all costs might choose to stay silent when they feel wronged, further reinforcing their tendency to suppress their true feelings, while another might confront the situation, learning to communicate their needs assertively and integrating a part of their shadow. The impact of these choices, though seemingly small in the moment, will have an immense effect on our overall journey. Yet, taking personal responsibility isn't easy because our ego is often resistant to facing the truth about ourselves. That part of our psyche that we identify as I will often protect us from the discomfort of acknowledging our shadow and confronting our self-deceptions. The ego will often actively sabotage the process of self-discovery, employing a multitude of strategies to keep us from engaging with our unconscious. These strategies can include denial, in which we simply refuse to acknowledge the existence of our shadow; rationalization, where we create seemingly logical reasons to justify our behavior; and of course, projection, where we attribute our own disowned traits to others. Imagine an individual who, rather than admitting their own insecurity, constantly criticizes others for their perceived flaws. This is the ego desperately trying to protect itself from the discomfort of self-awareness. This is the most challenging part of the work, and the very reason why so many choose to remain in a state of unconsciousness. It is a paradox, but integrating the shadow often means learning to accept our so-called negative traits, not to eliminate them. These traits are as much a part of who we are as our positive ones, and attempting to deny them or banish them into the darkness only leads to unconscious acting out and further alienation from ourselves. Think of an orchestra, each instrument playing its part, even the seemingly dissonant ones, and how the overall beauty of the symphony emerges not from suppressing any single instrument, but from embracing them all, allowing each to play their unique role. These qualities, which we often perceive as negative, are not inherently evil, but rather energy that, if harnessed correctly, can be used for growth and transformation. For instance, someone who has always been ashamed of their anger may learn to transform it into a powerful source of assertiveness, using their passion to stand up for what is right, rather than reacting unconsciously to every trigger. Our negative emotions must be understood as signals, pointing towards unmet needs and desires. Emotions like anger, envy, sadness are not to be avoided or suppressed, but rather understood as valuable pieces of information that can guide us toward a more authentic life. By understanding these feelings, we can gain insights into what is missing from our lives and make conscious decisions to meet our unmet needs, rather than acting out our unconscious desires. Imagine someone who transforms their feelings of jealousy, not by suppressing their emotions or judging themselves, but rather by understanding that it stems from a desire for deeper connection, and then choosing to nurture their relationships with more care. This approach is not about suppressing emotions, but rather understanding them, processing them, and using their energy for our own self-discovery. This entire process connects back to our pattern of avoiding versus engaging, in that avoiding these negative emotions and the insights that they offer only perpetuates unconscious acting out, while understanding and reinterpreting them allows us to consciously manage their energy and to transform the very nature of our being. We must also understand that when we shine the light of consciousness onto the roots of our shadow, we are no longer at its mercy, and instead transform the negative energy into a driving force for positive change. It is like a river that, when managed consciously, can be used for irrigation and life, but when left unchecked, can lead to destruction. And so too are our emotions, which can be transformed from a destructive force to a valuable asset. This is the very essence of conscious transformation, the alchemy of the soul. Imagine a specific scenario where an individual who has always been ashamed of their ambition sees it not as an inherently negative trait, but as a powerful drive that can be used for positive change. They may have always been told that their drive made them too aggressive or uncaring, and as such, they made an unconscious decision to suppress it out of fear of criticism. Yet, through the process of individuation, they come to see that their ambition is nothing more than an energy that can be used for the betterment of both themselves and others. They may then use this trait to achieve professional success, but also in ways that are genuinely ethical and compassionate, leading to true growth and purpose. This process of transformation is a common one, as we find that our perceived weaknesses often contain our greatest potential and unique gifts. But our shadow also contains disowned positive traits that we have repressed or hidden from ourselves. We often reject qualities that we admire in others because we have disowned these very aspects within ourselves. This often happens because we have been taught that these traits are not appropriate, or that they will somehow make us vulnerable. Consider, for example, someone who is naturally sensitive, yet has learned to hide this part of themselves because they believe it is a weakness, and that they will be seen as too fragile by those around them. Or someone who rejects their own creativity because they fear being ridiculed, or that their work will not be good enough. These are examples of how we often hide our own light instead of allowing it to shine. We hide our own inner treasure, and that is a great tragedy. The disowning of positive traits can often lead to a subtle form of self-sabotage, where we consciously limit our potential or undermine our own achievements, and this happens precisely because we believe, on a deep level, that we are not worthy of success, or that we do not deserve the very best that life has to offer. It's as if we've created an invisible ceiling that prevents us from reaching the very things that we most desire. Consider someone who unconsciously sabotages their own success by procrastinating on a project, even though they have all of the required skills to complete it. On some unconscious level, they are afraid of truly shining, and so they find ways to limit their potential and their own capacity for greatness. In this way, our shadow often prevents us from receiving the good that we are meant to receive. Again, we see the same pattern continue, that avoiding these positive traits keeps us playing small, where we are constantly limiting our potential, while embracing them allows us to step into our full potential, where we can truly live and contribute in our own unique way. Rejecting these aspects of ourselves keeps us in a state of false humility, where we are unconsciously limiting our own capabilities, for the very reason that our ego has learned to fear the full expression of the self. Think of a seed that is prevented from growing because it's been kept in the dark, without the necessary conditions to flourish. We must give the inner seed the proper conditions to grow. This is a critical aspect of the individuation process, where we must find a way to integrate these long-forgotten gifts. For example, an individual who has always dismissed their own creativity, perhaps believing that they are not artistic or skilled enough, begins to integrate it into their life through journaling, painting, or any other form of self-expression. This may lead to new professional ventures or simply enrich their personal life through the simple joy of creation, but this one small step can lead to greater fulfillment and joy. This is a common process of self-actualization that allows us to experience wholeness, and in this process, we often uncover gifts that we were completely unaware of. It is in these unexpected corners that our true potential lies. Authenticity arises from integrating all aspects of ourselves, not from trying to be someone we are not. It requires accepting our light and our dark sides, our strengths and our weaknesses, and it is in this very process that we become whole. Authenticity is a state of congruence, where our inner and outer selves are in harmony, free from the need to project any type of mask. It is a process of self-acceptance, where we embrace our imperfections as part of the beauty of our being. Think of a mosaic, where each piece, even the irregular ones, contributes to the beauty and complexity of the whole. We are like that, composed of many different facets, each essential to the overall tapestry of our lives. Living authentically also means aligning our actions with our inner values, not the expectations of others. When we are connected to our true selves, we have an inner compass that guides our decisions, freeing us from the need for external validation. This inner compass allows us to make choices based on our true needs and desires, rather than the expectations and demands of society or our own internalized sense of shoulds. Consider an individual who is faced with a difficult decision, one that goes against their family's expectations, yet they have the courage to follow their own inner guidance. This requires a great deal of strength and courage, and yet it's the only way we can truly live our own lives. Living authentically moves us from a state of unconscious compulsion to conscious choice, where we are no longer at the mercy of our shadows or the expectations of others. We move from avoiding ourselves to embracing the entirety of our being, no longer needing to hide behind the masks of our personas. It's like a boat that has finally found its true course and is no longer drifting aimlessly with the current, but instead sailing towards a destination that feels true and meaningful. This is the true freedom that Jung spoke of, a freedom that comes from knowing ourselves and living in alignment with our own internal compass. Fulfillment is not something we seek. It is a byproduct of living authentically and engaging with the world from a place of wholeness. The more we chase happiness, the more elusive it becomes. But when we embrace all aspects of ourselves and align our lives with our internal values, we naturally discover a deep sense of purpose and meaning. It is a paradox that by doing the inner work, we naturally create a life of fulfillment. It's not the other way around, and it's not by chasing external validation. This is the true meaning of a life well lived, and it is this understanding that prevents us from ever living a wasted one. Our relationships often serve as mirrors, reflecting back the parts of ourselves that we most need to confront. We must understand that the very things that bother us in other people are often reflections of issues within ourselves. These dynamics create opportunities for self-reflection, even though they are often difficult and painful. For instance, If someone is constantly irritated by another person's perceived arrogance, it's likely that they are struggling with their own disowned sense of self-importance. These interactions, though challenging, provide an unparalleled opportunity for growth and integration, and the people who challenge us the most are often the people who teach us the very most. Understanding projection allows us to see our relationships with more clarity and empathy. Instead of reacting to others based on our own projections, we can begin to see them as unique individuals with their own stories, struggles, and unique experiences. This approach diffuses conflict and promotes a more authentic connection as we move beyond our own biases and judgments to see them for who they really are. Consider a relationship that is plagued with constant conflict, and how, by becoming aware of their own projections, one person can shift their perspective, leading to a resolution. It is a powerful experience to see that what we thought was their issue was actually our own issue. As always, we see the same pattern repeat, as avoiding these difficult dynamics keeps us stuck in our unconscious patterns, and yet engaging with them offers an opportunity to learn and grow. When we stay stuck in the same old patterns, we perpetuate conflict, and we also fail to see the true value of the connection. It is like a karmic dance, where we keep repeating the same painful interactions until we learn the lessons that we are meant to learn. This cycle will continue until we consciously decide to break free and choose to see others with more compassion and ourselves with more honesty. By integrating our own shadows, we can move from projecting our disowned traits onto others to seeing them as they truly are, and as such we can form deep and meaningful connections based on authenticity and mutual respect. Our relationships will change dramatically as we begin to take responsibility for our own internal world and free ourselves from the burden of our unconscious compulsions. True intimacy is only available to those who are willing to face the totality of who they are and embrace both their light and their darkness. Ultimately, the responsibility for living a life of meaning and purpose rests entirely on our shoulders, and no one can do this work for us. It's our choice to either embrace or avoid our potential, and we must come to see that we are not victims of fate, but the authors of our own destinies. We must become aware of how the choices we make today determine the quality of our future, and this alone gives us great power. Countless ordinary people who decided to embark on this path of self-discovery have completely transformed their lives by taking personal responsibility, and you can too. The path of individuation is not about reaching a destination, but about continually moving towards wholeness and self-awareness, a path with many twists and turns, and it is our dedication to this process that counts, and this realization is essential for maintaining the motivation for this work. This journey is not a linear one, but rather a continuous cycle of growth, setbacks, and new discoveries, and this is a process that never ends. This is a journey that lasts a lifetime, and it requires a commitment to continuous self-exploration and honesty with ourselves. Again, we can see the same core pattern being reinforced. Choosing to engage with our inner world is choosing life itself, while choosing to avoid it is choosing stagnation. We have to understand that the choices we make impact the course of our lives, and that we can choose to either be driven by our unconscious or to live with conscious intent, and this decision alone will change everything. We must follow our internal compass if we are ever to reach our full potential, and we must never again ignore the inner whisper of our souls. Knowing all of this, how will you choose to live? Will you continue to let your unconscious run the show, or will you embrace the challenging but ultimately rewarding journey of self-discovery? Every moment presents us with a choice. To continue on the path of unconscious patterns, or to step into conscious awareness. This is not a one-time decision, but a continuous process that requires ongoing effort and vigilance. It's a moment-by-moment decision-making process that shapes our lives, and these seemingly small choices accumulate over time to create our overall experience. Consider, for example, a scenario where you are faced with a frustrating situation at work. You could react impulsively, driven by your shadow's anger, and potentially damage your relationships with your colleagues. Alternatively, you could choose to pause, take a deep breath, and respond with a sense of calm and clarity, allowing you to navigate the situation more effectively. The crucial point here is that, whether we are aware of it or not, we are always choosing. We are either choosing to engage with our inner world, or to continue operating on autopilot, letting our unconscious patterns dictate our actions. Each moment presents us with an opportunity to either step further into conscious awareness, or to continue down a familiar path of unconscious reactivity. This path of conscious choice is rarely easy because it requires us to confront our deepest fears and insecurities. Our unconscious patterns have developed over a lifetime and are deeply ingrained, making them incredibly difficult to change. Facing the shadow can be intensely painful, while over-identifying with the persona often feels safe, despite its inherent inauthenticity. Imagine someone who has always struggled with feelings of inadequacy, and as such they are now sabotaging their own success. They may have an important presentation coming up, and despite having prepared well, they may find themselves procrastinating or creating reasons to avoid it. They may even start to doubt their own capabilities or focus on any past failures rather than the present opportunity. They might even self-sabotage by engaging in behaviors they know are detrimental to their success, simply because the discomfort of facing their fears is greater than their desire for the reward. Understanding this resistance is a critical step in the process of change, because until we see that we are actively sabotaging ourselves, we will continue to do so. Each time we choose to stay in our unconscious patterns, we become more deeply entrenched in them, while each time we choose conscious awareness, we move closer to freedom. This is not a static state, but a continuous feedback loop, where our choices either reinforce our self-imposed limitations or propel us towards self-actualization. The direction that we move is determined by the choices that we make in each moment, like a river that flows in a certain direction. If we choose to stay in the current, it will be easy because it takes no effort, but it also will not take us to our desired destination. While choosing to swim against the current takes more effort, but it's the only way we can reach the shores of the new land. And so too, with our choices, we must understand that choosing to stay with what is familiar is easy, but it will not take us towards wholeness, and that choosing to engage with our shadow and confront the difficult parts of ourselves will ultimately set us free. The journey of individuation is often experienced as an inner struggle between our conscious desires and our unconscious patterns. The unconscious has immense power, and we must learn to master it if we are ever to live the life that we want to live. Imagine someone who is trying to start a new habit, such as exercising daily or eating healthier. They may find that the pull of their unconscious patterns is incredibly strong, perhaps with a sudden craving for comfort food or a sudden desire to stay in bed rather than to go for a run. This internal resistance to change is not uncommon, and it's precisely the reason why so many people fail in their attempts at transformation and give up on their desired goals. This inner struggle is often depicted in mythology as a hero fighting a dragon, but in reality, the dragon is our own unconscious patterns, and the hero is our conscious awareness. This is not a battle to be won once, but to be engaged in continuously. When we consistently choose to ignore our unconscious patterns, we become trapped in a cycle of compulsive behavior and self-sabotage. These unconscious behaviors are often driven by unmet needs and unresolved traumas, and when not addressed, they tend to repeat, creating a life of frustration, disappointment, and a continuous feeling of being stuck. Consider someone who repeatedly makes bad relationship choices, always drawn to partners who are emotionally unavailable or abusive. This individual may not even realize that they are recreating a dynamic from their childhood, where they felt neglected, and so they unconsciously continue to seek out partners who reinforce this pattern. unaware of the underlying psychological drivers. This leads to a never-ending cycle of pain, and each new relationship confirms their negative beliefs about love and connection and perpetuates the pattern. When we avoid the inner work, we simply repeat the same negative outcomes. Unconscious living is a path of missed opportunities and unrealized potential. When we are not aware of our inner selves, we miss the opportunity to grow, learn, and contribute our unique gifts to the world. When our lives are dictated by unconscious patterns, we are unable to access the unique gifts that we were meant to share with the world. Think of a seed that is prevented from growing. It contains a unique potential to become a beautiful plant or a mighty tree, yet it will never actualize this potential if it remains buried in the dark. So too with us. When we do not cultivate self-awareness, we remain limited in our ability to grow and contribute. We are all here for a purpose, and it is through the process of self-discovery that we uncover it. This process is not purely for our benefit, but rather for the collective benefit of the world. Avoiding our inner world not only causes pain, but it prevents us from making our unique contribution. By living from an unconscious place, we are not only missing out on what the world needs from us, but we are also missing out on what we need from ourselves. This is a tragic form of self-betrayal and a great loss for the collective. Our gifts are not meant to be kept hidden, but to be shared freely with the world, and this is often the very source of our deepest fulfillment. We must understand that we are all interconnected, and our contributions, no matter how small, have an impact on the whole, and it is by accepting this fact that we can find the true meaning of our lives. It's not just about our own individual well-being, but also about our role in the world and the mark we leave behind. Unconscious living creates an existential void, where our lives feel empty and without meaning, even when filled with external achievements. When we do not know ourselves, we often seek external validation, which never truly satisfies our inner longing. Imagine someone who has achieved great professional success, perhaps becoming a CEO of a company or a world-renowned artist, yet who still feels empty because they have not confronted their inner world. They might have all the material things that one could possibly desire, and yet they still feel a deep sense of unease, a feeling that something is missing. This emptiness cannot be filled by external achievements, but only through the journey of self-discovery. This existential void is a signal that something is out of alignment, and it is only through this inner work that we can begin to experience the true meaning of life. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means embracing all aspects of ourselves, both light and dark. This is not about becoming someone we are not, but about becoming more fully who we are. Wholeness is a dynamic process of integration, not a static endpoint. Consider the mythological figure of the hero, who often descends into the underworld to confront their shadows and to bring back the elixir of life. This journey is not about becoming flawless, but rather about accepting all the aspects of their being, both the light and the dark. Wholeness is about bringing our unconscious aspects into the light, and it is in this way that we become more fully integrated. It is not about suppressing our darkness, but about making it conscious, so that we are no longer driven by it. Our inner compass is a guide, not a dictator, that helps us to navigate the complexities of life with more grace and wisdom. It's the internal voice that knows what's right for us, and when we are connected to it, we can make choices that are aligned with our true values. As we integrate our shadow and become more aware of our persona, our inner compass becomes more clear and reliable. We may then start to experience a sense of inner knowing and trust that we are moving in the right direction. Consider someone who is faced with a difficult life choice, but instead of consulting others for validation, they consult their inner voice and make the decision based on their intuition. This is an example of how we can navigate the complexities of life when we are connected to our own inner guidance. This is how we live an authentic life. The journey toward wholeness moves us from a state of internal conflict and fragmentation to one of inner peace and integration. The integration of our opposing forces is what creates a harmonious and well-balanced existence. The inner battle transforms into a dance between opposing forces, and rather than being at war with ourselves, we learn to work together as a single unit. Think of a dance, which has moments of tension and moments of flow, and how it's the dynamic interaction between these elements that creates a beautiful and powerful experience, and so too it is with our own internal world. When we integrate all parts of ourselves, we are no longer in conflict, but rather we are in flow. To move toward wholeness, commit to daily self-reflection through journaling or meditation. Engage in active imagination and dream analysis. Be honest with yourself and practice self-compassion as you confront your shadow aspects. This is not a passive endeavor, but an active process, and it is the journey that matters most, not the destination. We must be consistent with these practices, and we must be willing to face the discomfort of self-exploration. Each step we take, however small, moves us closer to wholeness, and to the understanding that the goal is not to reach the end, but to be engaged in the process. We grow not by aiming for perfection, but by moving forward step by step. The pursuit of individuation is not about seeking happiness, but about finding meaning through self-discovery and embracing our unique purpose. External achievements will never truly satisfy us if we do not know who we are, and meaning arises from connecting to something greater than ourselves, and that starts by connecting to ourselves. This is a journey of purpose, not pleasure, and although the work may be difficult, the reward of living a life of meaning makes it worthwhile. Consider someone who gives up external validation and instead dedicates their life to helping others or to a creative project that is true to their soul. This is what it means to live a life of purpose, and in doing so, we naturally find fulfillment. A truly meaningful life is not measured by what we achieve, but by who we become and what we leave behind. Our impact on the world is a byproduct of our personal transformation, and it's not about what we accumulate, but about what we contribute to the world. Our legacy is not what others say about us, but what we know to be true about ourselves. Think of a historical figure who left a lasting legacy, not because of their material wealth or the power that they wielded, but because they were true to their own inner values, and because their work changed the lives of many. This is the legacy that matters, and it is one that each of us can achieve through the journey of individuation. Avoiding our shadow and living through our persona keeps us disconnected from our purpose, while engaging with these aspects enables us to live in alignment with our deeper values. A wasted life is one where we do not undertake this journey, but by understanding our shadow and using our persona consciously, we align ourselves with meaning and purpose. This is the most direct path to preventing a wasted life, and it is the one that will allow us to become who we were always meant to be. The central role of these concepts lies in their capacity to give us an understanding of our lives and to ultimately connect us to something greater than ourselves. Will you choose the easy path of unconscious living, or will you embark on the challenging but ultimately rewarding journey of self-discovery that will lead you to a life of authentic purpose? The power to change is in your hands, and a new way of living and being is available to those who are willing to do the work. True control comes not from suppressing our shadow, but by integrating it into our conscious awareness. This is a profound paradox, because our first instinct when we encounter something unpleasant within ourselves is to try to get rid of it, but Jung taught us that this only gives the shadow more power. When we deny or ignore our shadow, it operates from the unconscious, influencing our behavior in ways we cannot see, and we become controlled by the very thing we seek to avoid, like a dammed river. The more we suppress the natural flow of water, the more pressure builds, until the dam eventually bursts and the water becomes a destructive force, wreaking havoc on everything in its path. Similarly, when we suppress our shadow, the energy becomes destructive, manifesting in ways that cause harm to ourselves and others. Conversely, by accepting the totality of who we are, including our shadow, we are no longer controlled by it. We make it conscious, and we can then work with it rather than being enslaved by it. This is the path to mastering our own nature, a path that requires the utmost honesty and bravery, but is ultimately the only way to achieve true freedom. For instance, consider an individual who has a tendency to become angry. This anger may seem like an external force, controlling their behavior, causing them to lash out at others, and regretting it later. However, through self-reflection and shadow integration, they begin to understand the root cause of their anger, and through this process, they learn to consciously choose how to use the energy of their anger, directing it toward positive change, instead of being directed by it. This is not about indulging in our negative impulses, but rather about transforming them. Integrating our shadow doesn't mean indulging in our negative impulses, but channeling that energy in constructive ways. It's crucial to understand that these so-called negative impulses are actually a source of raw, untamed energy, which when made conscious, can be used for creativity, compassion, and positive action. When we suppress our shadow, we are effectively suppressing a vital part of our own power, a power that could be used for good. It's through awareness that we transform our shadow energy by understanding it, accepting it, and redirecting it. Consider someone who feels a great deal of envy. Rather than letting these feelings control them, they can consciously use the energy to fuel their own creativity and channel this emotion into artistic expression, using the pain they experienced as a catalyst for something beautiful. Similarly, an individual who is deeply moved by injustice can use their anger to become an advocate for social change, channeling the power of their shadow rather than being driven by it. This understanding is absolutely critical, because this is how we can transform our wounds into wisdom, our pain into purpose, and our darkness into light. It is only by accepting that all of these things exist within us that we can integrate them and learn to harness the power of our shadow. Avoiding the shadow leads to unconscious chaos, while engaging with it leads to conscious control and choice. The more we try to suppress it, the more it operates from the unconscious, influencing our behavior in ways that we can't control. And the more we engage with it, the more we can use the energy to benefit ourselves and the world. It's by looking at our own darkness that we bring it to the light, thereby allowing us to make more conscious choices in alignment with our truest values. Imagine a boat without a rudder. It's at the mercy of the winds and the waves, tossed about without any clear direction. This is what happens when we avoid our shadow. But when we choose to engage our shadow, we are adding the rudder to our boat, and we are able to navigate our lives with a greater sense of intention. This requires constant vigilance, because we must continuously make the conscious choice to engage with our inner world, rather than being driven by our unconscious patterns. The path to true freedom is to embrace all parts of ourselves, which leads to living a life of conscious intent, and it's by doing this inner work that we are able to master our own nature, rather than being enslaved by it. This is not about striving for perfection, but about embracing the totality of who we are, accepting the light and the dark within us, and making conscious choices about how we use our inherent energy. True freedom comes from understanding and accepting our shadow, not from trying to eliminate it, and this paradox is a key aspect of individuation. This journey is ultimately about freeing ourselves from unconscious compulsions and living in alignment with our true selves. It's not about striving to be someone we are not, but about becoming more fully who we are, and this is a process that requires both courage and compassion. Imagine a bird that has been trapped in a cage for its entire life. It may have forgotten how to use its wings, and may even be afraid to fly, but it can only truly be free when it accepts the wholeness of its being and learns to use both its wings. This metaphor beautifully illustrates our situation. We can only truly live when we are willing to face the totality of who we are, including our shadows. When we try to deny or ignore parts of ourselves, we're like the bird who only uses one wing. We're limiting our potential. We are not meant to be one-dimensional beings. We are complex and multifaceted, and so the path to freedom lies in integrating all parts of ourselves. This is the ongoing journey of individuation. As we integrate our shadow and become more aware of our persona, our external experiences begin to shift dramatically. This is because the external world is a reflection of our inner world, and so when our inner landscape shifts, our outer reality changes to reflect this transformation, like a mirror. If we are living in inner turmoil, our external experiences will often be marked by conflict and frustration. But as we begin to heal and integrate our inner world, we will begin to see more harmony and peace in our outer reality. This is not about wishful thinking or trying to manipulate the external world, but rather it is about understanding that we have the power to shape our reality from within. Consider someone who has previously experienced conflict everywhere they go. They may see the world as a hostile and dangerous place, but as they integrate their shadow, they may begin to experience more harmonious and loving interactions, and the world now seems to be more friendly and receptive. This shift is not coincidental, but is rather a direct result of their inner transformation. The change comes from within, and what we experience in the outer world is simply a reflection of our internal state. When we address the inner conflicts, our outer experiences naturally begin to reflect this inner change. When we no longer project our shadow, we begin to see others for who they truly are, not just a reflection of our own disowned traits. Projection distorts our perception of reality and prevents genuine connection. When we project our shadow onto others, we are seeing them through the lens of our own unresolved conflicts. Instead of seeing them as they are, as individuals in their own right, we see them as a mirror of our own darkness. This can cause significant damage to relationships, as we are constantly interacting with an illusion, and this makes it impossible to build genuine intimacy. Consider a relationship that was previously marked by constant conflict, perhaps because each person was projecting their own insecurities and fears onto the other, and they were constantly triggered by one another. But as each individual began to take responsibility for their own projections and stopped seeing the other as an extension of their own unconscious, this relationship may then shift dramatically. They may now see the other person as they truly are, with their own unique strengths and vulnerabilities, and this may create a new level of intimacy and connection that was not possible before. This also allows the space to begin to take ownership for our part of the problem, which creates more genuine interactions. It's important to remember that this process has a ripple effect, transforming not only ourselves, but also the relationships we have with those around us. Living authentically means moving from a state of internal conflict to one of inner harmony, from a life driven by unconscious compulsions to one guided by our authentic selves. It's a journey of self-discovery that leads us from fragmentation to wholeness, where we're no longer at war with ourselves, but are rather working with all aspects of our being. It's like a compass that has finally been calibrated and is now guiding us accurately toward our intended destination, no longer pointing us in the wrong direction. This is a powerful image, as it shows us that our inner work does not happen in a vacuum, but rather it has a direct impact on our ability to navigate our lives with greater clarity and purpose, and this inner shift is always reflected in our outer reality. This is the result of having done the inner work and of having committed ourselves to the path of self-discovery, where we are no longer slaves to our own unconscious compulsions. This is not a linear process, because there will be setbacks and challenges along the way, but this should not deter us from this path. The path towards authenticity is a path toward freedom. When we do the inner work, we not only change ourselves, but the world around us in ways we can't always predict. This is because we have shifted our lens and are now experiencing reality through a completely different framework. It's as if we have put on new glasses that allow us to see things in a completely new light, and suddenly the world seems completely different because we are different. This is not about trying to control our circumstances, but about learning to respond to them from a place of authenticity and wisdom. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. One who is responding from their shadow may react with anger defensiveness, and blame, while another who is responding from their authentic self may react with compassion, understanding, and a willingness to find a solution. The outer situation may be exactly the same, but the inner experience will be drastically different. This is because the lens through which we see the world is entirely dependent on our internal state, and so when we do the inner work, we not only change ourselves, but the entire world around us. The external world is a mirror of the internal world. Our journey towards wholeness isn't just personal, it's a contribution to the collective consciousness. As we integrate our shadow and live more authentically, we inspire others to do the same, like a single drop of water that creates ripples across the entire pond. This illustrates the interconnectedness of all beings, that we are all part of a larger whole, and our actions have far-reaching consequences, far beyond what we can imagine. When we choose to do our inner work, we are not only helping ourselves, but we are also helping everyone around us, and this is why this work is so very important. This is our true calling, to contribute to the evolution of consciousness and to create a more compassionate and understanding world. Consider the example of someone who faced their fears and chose to live their life with courage and authenticity. By doing this work, they inspired others in their community to do the same, creating a positive change. This is the power of example, and it highlights how our personal journeys can impact the collective. We are all interconnected, and the choices we make affect the whole. When more people embrace their shadows, it leads to a more compassionate and understanding world. When we no longer project our fears and insecurities onto others, we are less likely to engage in conflict and hatred, and we are more likely to create environments of empathy and support. This collective transformation is essential for the evolution of humanity, and so the path of individuation is not merely an individual pursuit, but it's an essential component for the advancement of our collective potential. When we no longer see the other as the enemy, but rather as a reflection of ourselves, the foundation for a more peaceful and just world begins to emerge. The future of humanity depends on people waking up to their own potential, and it is through this process of inner work that we will collectively move closer to a new, more evolved version of ourselves, a more kind and understanding version of humanity, one person at a time. Integrating our shadow and consciously using our persona are not just isolated actions, but are part of a larger movement toward collective enlightenment. The transformation of one person affects the collective unconscious, moving us all closer to our true potential. This is the interconnectedness of humanity, and this highlights that individual transformation also impacts the whole of humanity. When we heal ourselves, we are also healing the world, because we are all part of the same collective organism. This idea presents a sense of shared responsibility that by choosing to do our inner work, we are contributing to a better future for all. This may seem like a daunting task, but the good news is, we are not alone, and as more of us choose this path, the more powerfully it will manifest. Our journey towards wholeness is a gift not only to ourselves, but to everyone around us, and we must understand that we are all part of a larger story, and that each of us has an important role to play in it. When we align with our purpose, we are giving our unique gifts to the world, gifts that the world needs us to share. Our own healing is a gift to those around us, and when we are fully expressed, we are able to contribute our own unique medicine to the collective. We are all interconnected, and when we are not living in alignment with our true nature, we are not contributing what we are meant to give to the collective, and thus, the well-being of one affects the well-being of all. This is not just an idea, but is rather an observable reality, and it highlights the spiritual responsibility that we all share. We must live in alignment with our authentic nature, not only for ourselves, but for the good of all. The ultimate responsibility for living a meaningful life lies within each of us. No one else can do this work for us, and it's our choice whether to embrace or avoid the path of self-discovery, and this is the most important decision that we will ever make. We are the authors of our own lives, and the power to write our own story lies within us. This emphasizes the importance of taking ownership of our decisions and of understanding that we are not victims of our circumstances, but rather we are creators of our own experience. We are all here to contribute, but the path we choose is entirely up to us, and our lives will be a direct reflection of the choices that we make. Choosing the path of self-discovery is not easy. It requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to confront our deepest fears. The ego will resist this process because the unconscious seeks to remain hidden, and this internal resistance can feel painful and overwhelming. This journey is not for the faint of heart because it requires us to dive deep into the murky waters of our own unconscious and to confront the things that we have been avoiding for our entire lives. This path is not about avoiding pain, but about working through it in order to reach a higher level of consciousness, a more integrated way of being. And so the greatest act of courage that we can take is to be honest with ourselves and to step into the process of self-discovery, even when it is difficult. It's important to note that this process is not linear. There will be times when it feels overwhelming, but we must trust that we have the capacity to transform our darkness into light. Will you choose to remain in the darkness of unconsciousness, or will you step into the light of self-awareness? This is a powerful question that presents us with a clear choice, a choice that will ultimately shape the trajectory of our lives. This is the most important decision that we will ever make, and every decision that we make moves us closer to one outcome or the other. We must choose, and we must choose consciously. And the answer to this question is the difference between living a wasted life or living a life of meaning and purpose. We are all faced with this choice, every moment of every day, and it is the accumulation of these choices that determines our destiny. Embracing this challenging but rewarding journey will lead you to a life of purpose, meaning, and authentic joy. The transformative power of shadow integration and conscious persona utilization allows us to access a level of freedom that is beyond our imagination, because we all have the potential for greatness, and by integrating all parts of ourselves, we will access our hidden potential. This is not just a theoretical idea, but is rather a promise, the promise of a life beyond what we can imagine, a life of authenticity, connection, and purpose, and all of this is available to those who are willing to do the work. This is the path to preventing a wasted life, and the time is now. According to Jung, a wasted life isn't measured by external achievements or material success, but rather by our failure to engage with the unconscious, specifically the shadow and the persona. This means avoiding the discomfort of self-reflection and remaining trapped in unconscious patterns that dictate our actions without our awareness. Living only through our persona and projecting our shadow onto others is a life not truly lived, because it is a life lived in reaction to the unconscious and not in a conscious engagement with it. This returns us to the initial premise of our discussion, that a wasted life, in Jungian terms, is not defined by a lack of outer success, but by the absence of inner work. And it's this understanding that allows us to make a fundamental shift in how we measure true success. It is this process, this inner work, that allows us to finally take control of the direction of our lives. We have established the pattern of avoiding versus engaging throughout this journey, and we must now emphasize that by choosing to actively engage with our inner world, with our shadow, our persona, and our unconscious impulses, we prevent a wasted life from taking hold. When we embrace the discomfort of self-reflection, when we choose to take personal responsibility, when we choose to confront our deepest fears, we move toward authenticity, purpose, and meaning. The path of self-discovery, as difficult and daunting as it may seem at first, is in fact the most direct route to living a life that aligns with our true selves, a life that resonates with our deepest values, and a life that serves not only ourselves, but the world around us. It is only through this path of self-discovery that we discover the answers that we are seeking. The tragedy of a wasted life is therefore not the absence of external success, but but the failure to become who we are meant to be because of our unwillingness to look within. This tragedy, though, is not something inflicted upon us by outside forces. It is a tragedy that we inflict upon ourselves by ignoring our inner selves and by neglecting the call to individuation. Imagine a hidden treasure buried deep within the earth, a treasure that holds all the answers you seek, a treasure that represents your unique potential, your authentic self, and yet you are too afraid to dig for it. This is the tragedy of a wasted life, that the greatest riches lie within us, yet we refuse to embark on the challenging journey to discover them. The choice is always ours. We must shift our perspective and recognize that true success is not about outer achievements, but about inner integration. It is not about how much money we make or how many accolades we receive, but how well we have come to know ourselves. This internal process of integration is the most rewarding journey that we can ever take, because it is the path to understanding who we truly are and how we fit into the larger tapestry of life. And so, it is by doing the inner work that we find true and lasting fulfillment. This requires us to change the measure of success, shifting it from an external source to an internal one, and this is how we unlock our true potential. We must also understand that this inner integration is perhaps the most significant contribution we can make to the world, because it allows us to operate from a place of truth and compassion. This understanding isn't just about individual transformation, because our individual actions and choices affect the whole, and we must understand that it is our collective responsibility to create a more conscious and compassionate world. When we choose to face our shadow, we are less likely to project it, leading to less conflict, misunderstanding, and inequality in the world. A world filled with people who have integrated their shadows is a world that is more peaceful, loving, and understanding, and so we must recognize that our individual actions have a global impact, more than we can imagine. For example, one person who is not projecting their shadow can change the dynamic of their entire community, because the energy of authenticity is contagious, and it inspires others to do the same. The ultimate meaning behind the avoiding versus engaging pattern is that our choices are not just about psychological well-being. They are about creating a world based on love, rather than fear. The more people choose to face their shadows, the less likely they are to act from a place of fear, resentment, and hatred. This is why it is so vital that we all take responsibility for our own inner work, because this is a collective responsibility that we all share. Our inner work is directly related to the well-being of our fellow humans and the planet as a whole, and so when we choose to face ourselves, we are also choosing to engage in something much bigger than ourselves. Our journey is directly tied to the collective. The long-term implications of choosing to engage with our shadow are vast and far-reaching, because by living authentically, we not only improve our own lives, we also create a better world for future generations. When we choose to model the power of self-awareness and inner work, we set an example for those that come after us, creating a ripple effect and inspiring others to do the same. This is the only way to create lasting positive change in the world, because true change starts from within. Consider the examples of historical figures who chose this path and the lasting impact it had on the world, and know that we have the potential to have the same impact. This understanding of the shadow and the persona transforms not only our perspective on ourselves, but also on our place in the world. We move from a place of confusion to a place of clarity, realizing that we are not victims of our circumstances, but active participants in creating our own experience, and so we must ask ourselves, are we going to continue to live in unconscious reaction to the world, or are we going to begin to consciously create our own reality? This understanding of our own power is a key part of individuation and is essential to our journey toward wholeness. This realization creates a fundamental shift in our relationship to our lives. The challenges we face in confronting our inner world are not obstacles, but the very path towards wholeness. The journey of individuation is not about avoiding pain, but embracing it with courage, honesty, and self-compassion. Those struggles we face are the most important steps towards transforming our lives, and so we must not shy away from the darkness, but rather, we must embrace it with all our hearts, because this is how we move forward. We must present the challenges of integrating the shadow as opportunities for growth, and not as something to be avoided, for they are the key to our transformation. We have established the pattern of avoiding versus engaging. And now we must conclude that the only way to truly live is by facing our fears and embracing the totality of who we are, even the difficult parts. This reframes our understanding of the initial question, because a wasted life comes from the fear of our own darkness. But by embracing all aspects of ourselves, we can move towards true freedom. Imagine a seed that is afraid to break open, afraid to face the challenges of the world. But in order to grow into the mighty oak tree it is destined to become, it must first break open and face the light. We are all seeds with the potential to grow if we choose to face the challenges before us. Ultimately, a wasted life is one spent running from ourselves, refusing to acknowledge the shadow and hiding behind a persona, while a meaningful life is one where we embrace all of our aspects and live in alignment with our authentic values. This is the final conclusion that will bring clarity to our initial question and allow us to understand that we always have the power to choose our path, and that this choice is not limited by our circumstances. This is a decision that we all face, and it will ultimately determine the course of our lives. We have the choice to live a wasted life or to live a life of meaning and purpose, and we must choose wisely. The journey of self-discovery is not about finding an end point, but about the ongoing process of integration, and this journey is the most important journey we can ever take. The process of individuation is a lifelong commitment, and it's the most fulfilling path that we can possibly choose, because it's not about becoming perfect, but about becoming more fully ourselves. This journey is what gives our life meaning, not the achievement of some external goal. And so we must trust that we are on the right path, even when it feels difficult, because the process is what makes it worthwhile. We are not meant to arrive at some final destination, but rather, we are meant to enjoy the ride. As we begin this journey, new questions will arise, and this is a natural part of the process because there is always more to learn about ourselves, and the path of self-discovery is endless. We must now contemplate deeper questions such as, what does it mean to truly live in alignment with my purpose? And how can I contribute to the collective good? This journey requires continuous learning and self-reflection, and we must always be willing to challenge our assumptions and to explore new territories. We are each on our own unique path, and we must trust that our journey will lead us exactly where we are meant to be. This is the beauty of self-discovery. The insights gained from Jung's work can be applied to every aspect of our lives, from relationships to careers, and even to our spiritual journey. We are now called to explore other avenues of self-discovery, like spiritual practices, creative endeavors, or community involvement, and we must integrate these insights into all areas of our lives, for this is how we transform ourselves and the world around us. This is not a one-size-fits-all solution, because we must each explore the best path forward for ourselves. We are each unique individuals, with our own unique needs and desires, and we must learn to trust our own inner guidance. We are now prompted to take action through journaling, active imagination, and dream analysis, because these are powerful tools for exploring the unconscious. We must begin by reflecting on this discussion and exploring how these concepts relate to our own lives. We must also make a commitment to consistency and self-compassion. We must be willing to be patient with ourselves and to understand that the path of self-discovery is a long and winding one. It is also highly recommended that we join an online community to continue this conversation, because this is a shared journey, and we are not alone in this pursuit. The power to transform your life and prevent it from being wasted is within you. Will you choose to embrace the challenging but ultimately rewarding journey of self-discovery? This is the most important question that you can ask yourself, and how you choose to answer it will determine the course of your life. You are now encouraged to explore additional resources, like reading Jung's work or joining a Jungian group, because this journey is not meant to be embarked on alone. We must take this next step together, with hope and excitement, and with a clear sense of direction. Know that a continued journey of self-discovery is empowering and fulfilling, and this is where we will pick up our next thread.